Let's go Dolphins! The 2025 draft is approaching, and the Miami Dolphins board is preparing financially to make some changes. In the last few hours, we received news related to one of our players, and I'll tell you all about it. Many fans asked Chris Greer to look at quarterback Bo Nix, who is with the Denver Broncos, and bring him in. What do you think about this? Do you think Bo Nix would be a good addition to the team? If so, hit the like button. If possible, comment here with your opinion on this. Well, let's start by talking about a subject that is causing a stir on the web. It may be that player Kader Kohou stays in Miami. The former undrafted free agent has carved out an important role in the secondary over the past 2.5 seasons, and with a glaring vacancy at nickel cornerback, bringing him back may be an obvious choice for the board. But here's the kicker. He's a restricted free agent. That's a huge advantage for the Dolphins. It means Miami has the right to match any offer he receives, making it harder for other teams to lure him. And here's the kicker. Barry Jackson reports that Kohou's potential price tag would be just $3.2 million if the Dolphins offered him a first-choice contract. That's a steal for a player of his caliber. Now, let's talk about why that price tag makes so much sense. Kohou may have struggled in 2023 under Vic Fangio, but so did many Dolphins defenders. Despite a down year, Kohou bounced back in 2024, proving himself to be one of the best nickel cornerbacks in the league. His coverage skills were elite. When targeted, he posted a 76.0 QB rating, the best among Dolphins cornerbacks. He also recorded 2 interceptions and was highly effective at blocking slot receivers. But, and this is a big but, his tackling was a disaster. Kohou missed a whopping 14 tackles, leading to an abysmal 23.3% missed tackle rate, one of the worst among NFL defensive backs. The Dolphins secondary struggled with tackling all season, and Kohou was a major part of that problem. Anyone who watched the Thanksgiving game against the Packers saw the problem firsthand. Green Bay ran all over Miami, exposing a defense that simply couldn't bring down ball carriers. When Kohou lets a short catch go, there's a good chance that play will turn into a 10 to 12-yard gain because of missed tackles. And PFF made it official. His tackling grade came in at a dismal 28.4. That's a big red flag. So, Miami will overlook its tackling issues for the bargain price of $3.2 million? Absolutely. There's simply no better value on the market for a nickel corner. Kohou's ability in coverage outweighs his concerns at tackle, and at such a low price, letting him go would create another unnecessary hole in the defense. Miami already has decisions to make at outside corner. Kendall Fuller is a question mark on a non-guaranteed contract, and there's no clear replacement if he's released. The Dolphins don't need to add another problem by losing their nickel corner, especially when Kohou ranks in the top half of all nickel corners in nearly every coverage metric. To put that in perspective, among the 22 corners who played at least 50% of the nickel snaps, Kohou ranked 5th in QB rating allowed, 1st in yards allowed, and top 10 in touchdowns allowed. Those are elite numbers, and when you're paying just $3.2 million for that level of play, it's a move you have to make. Miami's pass defense ranked in the top 5 in the league in yards per attempt and yards allowed per game. Why split that? So, Dolphins fans, it's your turn. Do you want to see Kader Kohou return in 2025? Drop an S in the comments if you'd sign him, or P if you'd pass. With a cheap contract and elite coverage ability, the Dolphins would be foolish not to bring him back. But what do you think? Now, let's shift gears and talk about another key decision the Miami Dolphins will have to make this offseason. Calais Campbell, the veteran defensive lineman, signed a 1-year deal last May, and to say he exceeded expectations would be an understatement. At 37 years old, Campbell was not just a rotational piece, he was one of Miami's most productive defensive linemen all season. The question now is, will he return for another year, or is retirement on the table? Barry Jackson has already reported that the Dolphins want Campbell back, and that's a big deal. He was on a bargain $2 million contract last season, but bringing him back will likely cost more. Miami will have to decide if the price tag is worth it, but considering his impact on and off the field, this is a move they should absolutely consider. Let's break down just how good Campbell was. He played all 17 games, which is already an incredible feat for a 37-year-old defensive lineman. He racked up 5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and was an absolute force in the middle of Miami's defense. In fact, he was the second most productive interior defensive lineman on the team, behind only Zach Sealer. That's not just solid production, that's elite veteran leadership paired with high-level performance. But here's where things get interesting. Campbell hasn't committed to playing another year yet. He's expected to make a decision by March, meaning the Dolphins have about a month to wait and see if he'll run it back. If he does return, Miami is expected to be one of the top teams on his list. But there's one major factor at play here. Does Campbell believe the Dolphins are a contender? At this stage in his career, he's not coming back to just collect a paycheck. He wants a legitimate shot at a Super Bowl. And this is where things get tricky. Late in the season, there were rumors that Miami was considering releasing him so he could join a contender for the playoffs. That tells us two things. One, the front office respected Campbell enough to let him chase a ring. And two, he may not view Miami as a true Super Bowl caliber team right now. So, if he does decide to play in 2025, would he stay with the Dolphins? There's a strong case for it. Campbell has a deep connection to Miami. He played his college ball at the University of Miami and has already said he loved the locker room and defensive system last season. But at 38 years old, he has to ask himself, can the Dolphins actually make a serious run? Because if not, there are plenty of contending teams that would love to add a veteran presence like his to their defensive line. And here's another huge problem. If Campbell does retire or sign elsewhere, Miami's defensive line depth is in serious trouble. As of right now, Zach Sealer is the only defensive lineman under contract for next season. Chop Robinson, Bradley Chubb, and Jaylon Phillips are classified as edge rushers, not interior defensive linemen. That means, outside of Sealer, Miami has nobody on the roster to anchor the interior defensive line. Last season, Miami's four primary interior linemen were Zach Sealer, under contract, Calais Campbell, free agent, Benito Jones, free agent, Deshaun Hand, free agent. That's 3 out of 4 defensive tackles hitting free agency, leaving a massive hole in Miami's defensive front. Losing Campbell would be a major setback, especially considering the Dolphins' struggles against the run late in the season. Miami already has to rebuild the safety room, and now they might have to completely reconstruct their defensive line, too. That's not an ideal situation heading into free agency. So, here's where things stand. If Miami wants Campbell back, they're going to have to pay up. Last year, he signed for $2 million. This time around, he's probably looking at a $5 to $6 million deal if he chooses to play. And if the Dolphins don't make a strong offer, another team will. But more importantly, does Campbell believe in this team? If he sees Miami as a fringe playoff team rather than a true Super Bowl contender, he may choose to sign with a powerhouse like the Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, or Buffalo Bills. Teams that are much closer to a championship. And if that's the case, the Dolphins will need a backup plan fast. So now, it's time to hear from you, Dolphins fans. What do you think Campbell will do? Will he retire or come back for one more season? Drop a Y in the comments if you think he'll retire, or an N if you think he'll suit up for one more year. And if he does return, do you want him back in Miami? Let us know. Kader Kohou's return to the Miami Dolphins in 2025 is looking more likely, and at just $3.2 million, it's a move the team should make. His elite coverage skills in the slot last season made him one of the best nickel corners in the league, ranking top 5 in QB rating allowed and first in yards allowed among slot corners. But his tackling struggles, a 23.3% missed tackle rate, are a real concern. Still, at such a low cost, Miami can't afford to create another hole in the secondary when Kohou's coverage ability is so valuable. Meanwhile, Calais Campbell's future remains uncertain. The 37-year-old defensive lineman was a force for Miami last season, playing all 17 games and recording 5 sacks and 12 TFLs. The Dolphins want him back, but his return hinges on two things. Does he want to play another year, and does he believe Miami is a contender? If Campbell doesn't see the Dolphins as Super Bowl ready, he could sign elsewhere or retire. With Miami's defensive line depth already thin, losing him would be a huge setback. So, Dolphins fans, what do you think? Should Miami re-sign Kohou? Will Campbell return or retire? Drop your thoughts in the comments.